If Ben and I do not cover your particular state's race, that does not mean that it's not important, but there's so many races going on across the country. You got regional offices, judicial offices, federal offices. We could not possibly cover them all, but we're just gonna give you a little sampling. Is that all right? And then we want you to come on back. Between Jonathan and the team, and then the 8 o'clock team, we have you covered. So which races are we gonna talk about right now? I'm so glad that you asked. Here are the House races to watch. We have California's 22nd district, we have New York's 17th district, we have Oregon's 5th district, and we have Rhode Island's 2nd district. And here are some key ballot initiatives for these states. So California has on the ballot abortion as a constitutional right. New York, $4.2 billion for environment and infrastructure needs in that state. Oregon, healthcare as a constitutional right. We covered this story before. Go ahead on Oregon. Go ahead and let it start with you. And then we have Rhode Island, $400 million for infrastructure and education. And this information is coming from Ballotpedia. So again, key races and key ballot initiatives. Let us not forget that on election day, and every year there is an election. Sometimes we forget just because it's not the presidential, there's no such thing as an off-year election. Every single election season matters. And for this election season in particular, it's not just who's going to control the Congress, but on a more local level, what type of initiatives will pass to really help the people in those respective states. So I'm glad to see a variety of big initiatives on the ballot, particularly excited about the great state of Oregon, because I believe that a ripple effect is gonna happen all over this country. Come through, Oregon, we counting on you. So it could be the first state in US history to guarantee healthcare as a human right. It is indeed something that most Americans want, despite what you hear from the talking heads. And so we see on the graph that the majority of the American people, this is coming from the Gallup poll, and it does not matter what their political affiliation is, they believe that the government should be more involved in healthcare and to make sure that all Americans have health care coverage. Let's bold that, let's underline that, let's put an exclamation point. The people who are out of touch are the politicians. The people who are out of touch are the people who want to continue to commodify healthcare. But the American people know exactly what they want and what they need. This is a necessity. So come through, Oregon. Ben, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have big hopes for that ballot initiative in Oregon. Although I do have to say, like, I don't know the text of it, but I really, really hope that there's real money behind it. Because in Minnesota, for example, we a long time ago passed a constitutional amendment in our state constitution guaranteeing equality in education, right? And that for a very short period of time ended the local property tax version of funding schools. And after a very short period of time, that was brought back, right? It was brought back, and now Minnesota literally has one of the most unequal school systems in the country. So that ballot initiative is really gonna be just the beginning. But as far as like the races to watch, like fundamentally, this whole election cycle is really a nail biter, especially with Republicans already having introduced legislation that in some ways could effectively ban queer folks from public spaces by threatening to withdraw federal funding from any public or private institution that allows anybody under the age of 10 to even hear or see the mention of gay or trans folks. This is really like a nail biter election because Democrats need to hold on to at least one chamber to effectively prevent stuff like that from happening. Because as much as Joe Biden has the veto power, like, do we really trust? Do we really trust that he's not going to make some sort of grand compromise, or that he's maybe going to throw somebody under the bus? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but I'm always weary of compromises between somebody like Joe Biden and a Republican House and Senate. But with all of that said, to your point, Nina, is earlier you said like the off-cycle elections are super important. I would argue to say that in some ways they're more important, and that also is kind of why they're off-cycle elections, because like fundamentally, your county commissioners, your elected judges, right, your city council members, they have a ton of power, way more power than you would actually think that they do. And the unfortunate reality is that the way journalism is in the United States, there just hasn't been a big budget to like constantly keep track of like what county commissioners are up to. So if all it takes is you reaching out to somebody that you trust, who knows like who is gonna be good and not good for those positions, like please reach out to whoever you need to figure out those smaller local races, because they have a lot of power.
They do, and I don't think you're being cynical at all. We know that this president was involved in the so-called grand bargain many decades ago to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So I don't think you're being cynical at all. You're just laying it down the way that it is. That at this particular moment, we really do need the Democrats to hold control, or to your more important point, at least control of one of the chambers, so that we can push back on the wickedness that today's GOP on the federal level, again, especially, and also on the state levels too. Unfortunately, they control most of the legislatures and the governor's mansions in this country. The point about how local government is so vitally important is often overlooked. And I like to say that there really is no such thing as an off-year election. That every single election cycle we have to be on and popping. Now there are presidential election cycles, and then there are election cycles where you're doing the gubernatorial candidates, you're doing your county commissioners or county executives, council members, judicial candidates have a lot of sway and say on how one navigates through life. Those races are vitally important. And Ben, the extra special point that you made about those types of races being even more important, because local government, the closer the government is, the faster the people will feel the impact. And so we, the people, have to pay attention to those races a lot more, regardless of whether mainstream media is talking about them enough. They are all important. So we know that we have universal healthcare, democracy, investments in communities and the environment, reproductive freedom are all on the ballot, along with so much more. Yeah, please, if you have not voted yet, go and vote. Don't let anybody steal your ability to exercise your voice. Most people are not gonna run for office, but we all have the opportunity to get out there to vote. And even if there are hurdles in your state, which a lot of states are putting up a lot of hurdles because the GOP, they've just lost their ever-loving minds. I'm quoting my grandmother, I still want you to go out to vote, even no matter what, go out to vote.